For this lecture, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the history of psychic detection. Whilst I would argue we've seen more psychic detectives in the 20th century than we have any other period in history, it doesn't mean that it is a modern phenomena. Actually, there have been instances of psychics being involved in cases prior to that, but just not anywhere near as frequent. A good example would be Jacques Aymar. There was a murder case that happened in France a few hundred years ago, murder of a wine grower, and Jacques Aymar was involved as a dowser to try and track down those responsible for the murder. A well-documented case, an unusual case, but one that I could argue was probably the first written account of a psychic detective, somebody using their ability to assist in a criminal investigation. Interestingly, there's also an example of this within the Jack the Ripper case. Although, of course, we don't have a resolution to that particular case, we don't know who committed the murders, the involvement of Robert Lees at the time as a psychic gives us a fascinating account of how a psychic can get involved in a criminal investigation, and also how impressive it can appear. So Robert Lees was able to provide some interesting information about the crime scenes that the police had not released to the public. And that's what made the information more evidential, at least to the police. The fact that Robert was able to provide particular information about the injuries and about the post-mortem surgery, for want of a better word, that was conducted by Jack the Ripper at the time. Got to be a little bit skeptical about it though, because Robert Lees was also involved as a journalist at the time and would have had potential contacts within the police who he could have got the information from. However, it still provides you with a context letting you know that psychic detection happened over 100 years ago, at least in terms of those famous cases. We really only hear about psychic detection, though, again, when we get to about the 1930s, although there might have been fleeting instances where mediums might have been involved and given information not very well documented and not very successful prior to the 1930s. During the period 1930s and 1960s, however, we get the involvement of people like Janos Kell, Dr. Maximilian Langsner, Frederick Marion, individuals who, at least on the European continent, seem to be assisting the police in some way using their psychic ability. Two key names, though, associated with the 1960s and later are Gerard Croiset and also Dorothy Allison, two key, what I would call, superstars amongst psychic detection. And in fact, Gerard Croiset, the Dutch psychic, was known as the Mozart among clairvoyants for his work, both in psychic detection, but also with the work that he conducted with Dr. Tenhaeff at the University of Utrecht. Dr. Tenhaeff was a parapsychologist, and he was interested in the claims that were being put forward by Gerard, and he invited him into the lab and tested him using various control tests. And it's on written record that Dr. Tenhaeff says that Gerard Croiset is a genuine example of a clairvoyant. So he found very positive evidence for him. Unfortunately for Gerard Croiset, whilst there have been a number of cases where he supposedly provided highly accurate information to help solve cases, you know, one of the most famous cases that he was involved with was, unfortunately, him tracking down a missing prize-winning pig, and that kind of plagued him for the rest of his life. That's what he became most famous for. However, with Gerard, you get one of these early superstars responsible for solving a number of different cases. Similarly, Dorothy Allison, an American psychic medium, was involved in a number of interesting cases. It's said that she predicted the assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan, for example, but also has consulted and advised the FBI on cases. Now, as part of my psychic detective research, because I'm fascinated by this stuff, I was able to track down some of the information around Dorothy Allison's involvement with the FBI. And it's not exaggerated press as I thought it might be. She was genuinely involved with the FBI. However, it's slightly different. She wasn't involved in terms of trying to give information about particular crimes. The FBI thought it might be useful to involve her in training some of their agents in how to get in touch with their intuitive side. If anything, how to make instant decisions, go with their gut, that sort of thing. So certainly not training agents to be psychic detectives, but actually giving them a skill that's around decision making. So she was involved in all of those cases, but also there are a number of different cases she was involved in, famously a murder case in Atlanta, as well as various others, primarily based in North America. So that is an overview of the history of psychic detection. You can see that whilst we see a preponderance of key individuals from the 1930s onwards, including some more modern individuals. For example, Uri Geller is particularly well known for his psychokinetic work in terms of bending spoons, but he's been involved in a number of cases as well, helping provide information to the families in missing person cases. So you get a number of these individuals, 1930s onwards, and kind of it appears to be the heyday when you get superstars, 60s, 70s and 80s, such as Dorothy Allison and Gerard Croiset and others who really came to the fore and received a lot of press interest in terms of their involvement in criminal investigations, but also importantly see that whilst they are very rare, there have been earlier incidents of psychic detection. What I'd like to do for the next lecture then is talk you through a particular case that's well known in the literature, maybe as a case is not so well known outside of the psychic detective literature, but well known in terms of the involvement of a psychic and how the case actually panned out.